Hello, welcome. Patch 1.11.12 just dropped. It's just a minor patch, right? No, it completely rebalances tanks. Again, they changed tank conversion cost again. They changed resources costs. They changed piercing bonuses. They hard nerfed recon tanks and kind of light tanks. And they fixed my little bug here. Motorized equipment is now essential for motorized RDATAA divisions, which is really disappointing. So this is, an infantry division with AT3 in it. This is it with the motorized AT3, but no trucks. You get literally nothing. They completely removed the piercing from it altogether. Now, if we give it its trucks back, it does still get its piercing bonus, but they nerfed all the piercing bonuses. If we go through here, the lower three seem to have all gotten nerfed by about 5%. So piercing is going to be a lot harder to come by than it used to be. And they changed the armor value stat. So armor versus average is misleading. It's actually the highest value. So it's 40% of highest, 60% of average now, rather than before it was 30 and 70. They reduced the resource cost of tank upgrades and they removed the multiple stabilizers. So if we come in here, we take a new tank, you can't put multiple stabilizers on them anymore. You can't just stack 4 of them for 20 breakthrough. Recon tanks are now proportional to unit size. We'll take a look at this very expensive recon tank I designed. The keen eye will notice this doesn't cost a chromium. I have 17 armor though, that should cost me 2. Nope, armor and engine no longer cost chromium, but they also nerfed recon tanks, which is why I opened them. And it's why I'm stacking so much armor. If we come in here, recon tanks now use proportional stats. What that means is, because there's only 24 light tanks in the support company, we're only going to get 24 out of 60 because there's 60 light tanks in a regular battalion, which is equal to 40% of the stats. So if we just use the starting improved tank chassis the Germans have, 17 armor, that used to be enough armor to prevent you from getting pierced. That is no longer true. 15 used to be the amount you needed. Now, this is the cheap variant. It has 33.6 armor. 33.6 armor is only going to give you 5.9 armor. You need about 30 armor on your light tanks. And the stat bonuses they provide got nerfed. So these guys are using the new nerfed basic high velocity cannon. They dropped it from 90 down to 68. So now you're only going to get 33 piercing from that. Before you used to get 40. It's no longer an effective replacement for AT. It's just not nearly as good. I mean, you can still do it. If I put this on the tank, if I put this tank in, it's going to give me 30 extra breakthrough. Now I'm going to pay for that breakthrough. With this tank, that's going to increase the cost of the division by 30%. Now, if you're not getting pierced, that's a 40% increase in your damage and a 50% reduction in the damage you're going to take. So that is still cost effective, but it's nowhere near as OP as it used to be. Now we can go for the cheapest variant. That's still a 25% increase in the cost of your division. So light tank recon, nowhere near as good as it used to be. While we're here, light flame tanks kinda got nerfed. The medium flame tank now provides 10% more fort attack, 5% more forest, urban, and jungle attack over the light flame tank. So that's going to be quite a bit better. So making very cheap medium flame tanks might be the better option. And then the heavy flame tank, they're a bit weird because they get bonuses versus fort, but they lose the river, amphibious, mountain, urban, and jungle attack bonuses. So they're not as good as medium flame tanks. So medium flame tanks are gonna be the sweet spot for these. Now you don't have to spend a lot on this. The medium flame tank I'm using is the interwar one. It only costs 3.6 IC. Now, that is about 50% more expensive than the light flame tank used to be, but that's still cheaper than the artillery support company. I would still go for support artillery first because it doesn't cost fuel and it provides more soft attack. But medium flame tanks are going to be the meta going forward. Whether or not you want to put a whole bunch of stats on them or not, that's up to you. Remember, they are also proportional. So you're only going to get 30% of your stats. Now, you're only going to spend 30% of the cost. So technically, flame tanks are equally as cost effective as a regular tank battalion because you're getting the same amount of stats per IC spent. It's something people always ignored, but their concentration of stats are not very good. Let's move on to conversion. So I've got this old tank, 11.7 IC, and then I'm going to convert it to this new tank, 16.16 IC. If I do that conversion with the 2 techs, it's going to cost me 4.7. The actual cost of the conversion is 0.4 just for the chassis, and then the rest is the actual cost. But this is with the 2 tank conversion techs. Without the 2 tank conversion techs, you're going to pay 90% of the cost of the chassis. So I wouldn't really bother doing conversions unless you're going to do those 2 techs. If you do those two techs, you can still do the thing I showed in a separate video where you produce a tank that doesn't have the modules. Maybe you don't have the advanced radio yet, so you don't want to put the improved radio on. So you intentionally produce a tank without the radio, and then you upgrade it to a tank that has the radio. That will still be worthwhile. That is not a significant cost increase if you have the two conversion techs. If you don't have the two conversion techs, don't bother. Just start producing ones with the improved radio and then swap to the advanced radio when you have it. Now, I did mention earlier, there's no increase in the resource cost when you go up to 10 or when you go past 14 anymore. This means you can now put a lot of armor on your tanks without spending a lot of resources. And that was one of the main reasons you didn't want to do it earlier. So this begs the question, is it worthwhile stacking armor? Especially considering they just nerfed piercing. Well, I've got some designs. 4 main designs, but I've got options within these 4. We've got basically the older design. This is where you didn't care too much about your armor on your tank. You want about 65. 60 to 65 will leave you not being pierced by AT2 most of the time. This would not be pierced by a single line AT. 2 line AT would pierce this, or motorized AT with its trucks. Previously, this was enough piercing to pierce any tank you're going to come across. 604 doesn't look like a lot of breakthrough, but it's almost double the soft attack and hard attack, so that is good enough. This tank was going to cost 9,569 IC. Now, you could still do this, but you're going to run into one problem. This new one that I've designed, taking into consideration that armor can now be used without the additional resource cost once we swap with 3 medium tank destroyers. These tank destroyers have the improved high velocity cannon. They're only getting 114 piercing. Now, part of the problem with this is I didn't actually put much armor on my tank destroyer. You're going to want to put armor on your tank destroyer if you're going to do this. And I'm also using the squeeze bore on it. If I swap off the squeeze bore, that's a comfortable margin. So you're going to want to put squeeze bores on your tank destroyers now. I'm not so certain you want to put it on your regular tanks, but definitely on your tank destroyers. Because this is the advanced medium tank. You can't really do this with the improved medium tank because it doesn't have quite as much base armor. But with the advanced medium tank, you can try and go for armor. But it also begs the question, what about heavy tanks? 153 armor. Now this is 54% more expensive than the cheap Panther. And it's still 15% more expensive than the Panther with armor on it. But 153, that's a lot. Even an improved heavy tank destroyer with the squeeze bore cannot pierce that. This is just with welded. That is just this design. I'm only using welded. I didn't go for cast because that's not cost effective. An increase of 8 IC. I'm only stopping at 17 because you're realistically not going to get 18 because that's very late game tech. But 228 armor on this thing. So that's 153 armor. That is never going to be pierced by a tank that doesn't have. If we swap in a couple medium tanks, these medium tanks, the advanced medium tank destroyer, the Jagdpanther C has a squeeze bore and the advanced high velocity cannon on it. Now it's pierceable again. But there's definitely going to be a window where you can have this 152 armor, and they're not going to have the advanced high velocity cannon. And even once they get the advanced high velocity cannon, they're not going to have every tank that has it. And you don't just use the highest stat, you use an average of the stats of all the tanks in your division. So they're going to have to completely replace all of their TDs for them to get that piercing amount. Now there are some things we can do to slightly increase the armor value. We can swap to cast, we can give it armored skirts. We could do the last tech in research all the way up to 20. So now we're up to 261 armor. If we make that save, we're now at 173. Even with the medium TDs, you'd need 3. 3 is enough to get you pierced. But don't forget, these tanks don't have nearly as much armor as these heavy tanks. So armor is going to be a lot more viable, especially against those enemies that aren't prepared for it. So this is definitely going to be one of those instances where you want to do your spy network. You want to have the spy network so you can come in here and you can take a look at their stockpile. If you can manage to get this up to 80%, you can see exactly what they're doing. Armored Recon is way less cost effective than it used to be. Can still be done, but not nearly as OP. Medium flame tanks are the meta for flame tanks now. Light flame tanks took a nerf. They don't give as many bonuses as they used to. You can't do the motorized trick. You can't come in here and turn off trucks and still get your piercing. Even the division designer knows that once you disable trucks, you no longer get your piercing. Motorized AT in general just isn't that much better anymore. And then tanks. You might want to put armor on your tank divisions now. An enemy that isn't prepared for it is going to be caught in a position where they cannot pierce your tanks. And you are going to have to use medium tank destroyers. If you're just using medium tanks with the improved medium cannon on it, you're not even going to come close to piercing yourself. And if you can't pierce enemy tanks, then you're just done for. It doesn't matter if you have 20 tanks and they only have 10. If their tanks can just right click yours, then you're just done for. There's nothing you're going to be able to do. Also, maybe convert sometimes. It might be worthwhile if you do the techs. Anyways, thank you for watching, and I will see you guys next time.